It was the moment the Franks ceased to be Roman federates and became the masters of northern Gaul. With this victory, Clovis absorbed a vast territory, a population of Gallo-Romans, and a network of cities administered by Catholic bishops. His kingdom was now a hybrid entity, a Germanic warrior elite ruling over a sophisticated Latin-speaking Christian populace. It is here, in the aftermath of Soissons, that one of the most famous and revealing anecdotes about Clovis takes place. It is the story of the Vase of Soissons, as recounted by Gregory of Tours. After the battle, as the spoils were being divided among the Frankish warriors, a bishop sent a desperate plea to Clovis. Among the looted treasures was a magnificent liturgical vase, a vessel of great beauty and sacred importance to his church. The bishop begged the king to return it. Now, Frankish custom was clear. Spoils of war were divided by lot. Even the king was not entitled to take an item that was not his by chance. To do so would be to violate the bond of equality that existed between a chieftain and his warriors. Clovis, ever the pragmatist, understood the political value of the bishop's goodwill. He agreed to the request. At the assembly where the loot was being divided, he asked his men if they would grant him the vase, over and above his allotted share. Many of his warriors, respectful of his leadership, agreed. But one soldier, jealous of the king's authority, or simply a stickler for tradition, refused. He stood up, raised his Francisca throwing axe, and brought it crashing down upon the vase, shouting, "You shall have nothing here, except what the lot gives you." The vase was shattered. Clovis, though inwardly seething with rage, did nothing. He swallowed his anger, accepted the broken pieces, and returned them to the bishop's emissary. The law of his people had been upheld, and he had been publicly humiliated. The king did not forget. A year later, during a military review, Clovis was inspecting the weapons of his soldiers. He came to the man who had shattered the vase. He criticized the man's weapons, saying they were poorly maintained. His spear, his sword, his axe were all in a state of neglect. He then took the man's axe and threw it to the ground. As the soldier bent down to retrieve it, Clovis raised his own axe and brought it down on the man's skull, splitting it open. As the man fell dead, the king is said to have declared, "Thus you did to the vase at Soissons." This story, whether entirely factual or not, is a chilling and brilliant piece of political theater. It illustrates the core dilemma of Clovis's early reign. He was a king of two peoples, bound by two sets of laws. The first part of the story shows him as the Frankish chieftain, subject to the traditions of his warriors. He cannot simply command, he must persuade. His authority is not absolute. But the second part shows the emerging monarch, a man who understands that to build a lasting state, he must establish a different kind of authority, one based on absolute power and the right to dispense justice, or vengeance, as he sees fit. The calculated cold-blooded revenge, a year in the making, sent a clear message to all his followers. His power was growing, and he would not tolerate defiance. But it also shows a man who understands the need to act within a certain framework. He did not execute the soldier for defying him over the vase. He executed him for the crime of having poorly maintained weapons, a legitimate cause for punishment in a military setting. It was a legalistic and brutal solution to a political problem. It is this same calculating mind that you must imagine turning to the problem of religion. For years, Clovis remained a pagan, even as he expanded his rule over Christian lands. He respected the church, he protected its property, and he corresponded with its bishops, most notably with Saint Remigius, the influential bishop of Reims. We have letters from Remigius to the young king, congratulating him on his victories and urging him to rule with justice, to listen to his bishops, and to treat his subjects well. It is a correspondence filled with gentle persuasion, a subtle and patient campaign of influence. The turning point, according to tradition, came through his wife Clotilde. Clovis's marriage to the Burgundian princess was, on its face, a standard political alliance. The Burgundians were a neighboring Germanic kingdom, and the marriage secured a valuable ally. But Clotilde was not a pagan, nor was she an Arian Christian like most of the other Germanic tribes, who followed a version of Christianity that the Catholic Church considered heretical. Clotilde was a devout Catholic, a follower of the same faith as the bishops of Gaul and the majority of Clovis's Gallo-Roman subjects. Gregory of Tours portrays her as a tireless evangelist at her husband's court, constantly urging him to abandon his idols and embrace the one true God. Clovis, the story goes, was resistant. He would engage in theological debates with her, pointing out that her gods seemed to have little power. Their first son was baptized a Christian, but the infant fell ill and died shortly after. To the pagan king, this was proof of the weakness of the Christian God. If the child had been consecrated in the name of my gods, he is said to have declared, he would surely have lived. But as he was baptized in the name of your God, he could not live at all. It was a powerful argument, rooted in the pragmatic, results-oriented worldview of a warrior. A god was worthy of worship if he delivered victory, prosperity, and healthy children. By this measure, the god of Clotilde had failed. Despite this tragedy, Clotilde persisted. A second son was born, also baptized, who also fell gravely ill. It seemed that history was repeating itself. Clovis was prepared to blame his wife's faith once again. But, as Gregory tells it, through Clotilde's fervent prayers, the second child recovered. For Clovis, this might have been a crack in the armor of his skepticism. This god was not entirely powerless. After all, he could take a life, but he could also spare one. The scales were beginning to balance. But it would take more than a domestic drama to convert a king. It would take a crisis, a moment of existential threat on the battlefield, for the pragmatic warlord to finally see the strategic advantage of a new faith. The moment came in the year 496, during a desperate battle against the Alemanni, another powerful Germanic confederation, who were threatening his northeastern frontier. The battle was going badly. The Frankish army, for the first time under Clovis's command, was on the verge of breaking. They were being pushed back, their lines wavering, defeat seeming inevitable. In this moment of desperation, Clovis, the pagan king, found his own gods wanting. They had failed him. Looking up to the heavens, with the sounds of battle ringing in his ears, he made a vow. He is said to have cried out, "O Jesus Christ, you who Clotilde affirms to be the Son of the living God, you who are said to give aid to those who are in distress, and to grant victory to those who hope in you, I seek the glory of devotion to you. If you grant me victory over these enemies, and I experience that power which the people consecrated to your name claim to have, I will believe in you and be baptized in your name." It was a battlefield bargain, a soldier's prayer, a promise of faith in exchange for victory. And as the story goes, the moment the vow was made, the tide of the battle turned. The Alemanni began to fall back. Their king was slain, and they surrendered to Clovis, agreeing to become his subjects. The god of Clotilde had delivered. He had proven his power in the only language a warlord truly understood, the language of victory. Now, Clovis was bound by his oath. But how does a king, whose entire identity is tied to the ancient gods of his people, announce that he is abandoning them for the god of his wife and his conquered subjects? This was not just a personal decision, it was a political revolution. When Clovis returned from his victory over the Alemanni, he was a changed man, bound by an oath made in a moment of mortal terror. But he was still, above all else, a king, and a deeply pragmatic one. A vow made on the battlefield was a spiritual contract, but its execution had to be a matter of careful political strategy. He could not simply return to his court and declare that the ancient gods of the Franks, the gods of his father and his ancestors, were now null and void. Such a move would have been seen not as an act of pious faith, but as a betrayal, an inexplicable madness that could have fractured his army and cost him his throne. The conversion had to be managed. His first confidant was, naturally, the person who had planted the seed of the idea years before, his wife, Queen Clotilde. He recounted the story of the battle, the moment of desperation, the vow, and the miraculous turn of the tide. For Clotilde, this was the culmination of years of patient prayer and persuasion. Gregory of Tours tells us she was overjoyed and immediately, in secret, sent for Bishop Remigius of Reims. Remigius, later to be known as Saint Remy, was one of the most powerful and respected churchmen in Gaul. He was a man of noble Gallo-Roman birth, wise, eloquent, and deeply connected to the political and spiritual life of the kingdom. He was the perfect guide for a king on the precipice of such a monumental decision. Imagine those clandestine meetings. The pagan warlord, his long hair a symbol of his divine Frankish lineage, sitting opposite the Roman bishop in his clerical robes. This was not just a simple catechism class. This was a negotiation, a strategic alignment. Remigius would have instructed Clovis in the core tenets of the faith, but the most important lesson would have been a political one. He was not just converting to Christianity. He was converting to a very specific form of it, Nicene Christianity, the faith of the old Roman Empire, which we now know as Catholicism. This distinction is the absolute key to understanding the genius of Clovis's move. It may seem like a tedious theological detail, but the difference between Nicene and Arian Christianity was the defining political fault line of the 5th and 6th centuries. Most of the other Germanic kings, the Visigoths who ruled Spain and southern Gaul, the Ostrogoths in Italy, the Vandals in North Africa were Arian Christians. Arianism, in simple terms, held that Jesus Christ was a created being, divine but subordinate to God the Father. To the Nicene Catholics, this was a damnable heresy. They believed in the Trinity, the concept that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit were of the same substance, co-eternal and co-equal. By choosing Nicene Christianity, Clovis was making a profound strategic statement. He was bypassing the Arianism of his barbarian rivals and aligning himself directly with two immensely powerful groups. The first was the Pope in Rome, the spiritual head of the Catholic world. The second, and more immediately important, was the vast Gallo-Roman population within his own kingdom and, crucially, within the neighboring kingdoms of his rivals. These people, from the wealthiest senator to the humblest peasant, were devoutly Catholic. They viewed their Arian Visigothic and Burgundian rulers as heretics, as illegitimate overlords who professed a corrupted faith. By becoming the only major Catholic king in the West, Clovis transformed his image overnight. He was no longer just a Frankish conqueror. He was now the defender of the true faith. He was a champion, a potential liberator, for the oppressed Catholic populations living under Arian rule. It gave him the perfect pretext, the divine mandate, even for future wars of expansion. He could frame his conquest of the Visigothic kingdom not as a naked land grab, but as a holy war, to free his fellow Catholics from heretical tyranny. It was a move of breathtaking political brilliance. Furthermore, by embracing the faith of the bishops, he gained more than just their prayers. He gained their administrative machinery. The Church was the last functioning remnant of the Roman Empire's civil infrastructure. Bishops were not just spiritual leaders. They were the effective rulers of the cities. They could read and write, manage estates, collect taxes, and command the loyalty of the populace. In converting, Clovis didn't just get a new god. He acquired a ready-made bureaucracy. But first, he had to sell this revolution to his own people. His Frankish warriors were pagans who believed their victories came from Woden's spear and Thor's hammer. How could he convince them to now credit their success to the god of the people they had just conquered? According to the Chronicle, once Remigius had prepared everything for the baptism, Clovis gathered his army. He did not command them. He stood before them as their king, but also as their fellow warrior, and he spoke. He told them of the Battle of the Alemanni, of the failure of their own gods in the face of defeat, and of the vow he had made. He laid out his decision not as a royal decree, but as a personal testament. The response, as recorded by Gregory of Tours, was a political miracle. The warriors, who a year before had seen one of their own smash a sacred vase in defiance of the king. Now supposedly cried out with one voice, "O pious king, we abandon our mortal gods, and we are ready to follow the immortal God whom Remigius preaches." It is a beautiful and inspiring image, but it is likely a simplification. The reality was probably far more complex. Some warriors and nobles undoubtedly converted out of genuine loyalty to their king. Others, shrewd politicians in their own right, saw the immediate political advantages and followed suit. Many probably consented publicly, while privately continuing to hedge their bets, keeping a small shrine to the old gods in a corner of their estate, just in case. But the public consensus was achieved. The chronicle claims that more than 3,000 of his soldiers were baptized alongside him. The Frankish people, as one, would officially enter the Christian world. The ceremony itself was planned as a spectacle of immense power and solemnity, designed to awe all who witnessed it. It took place, by tradition, on Christmas Day of 496, in the city of Reims. The baptistry was adorned for the occasion. The streets were hung with tapestries, the church filled with the scent of burning incense, the air thick with the sound of chanted psalms. This was not a humble, private affair. It was a public demonstration of a new order. Clovis, the fearsome warlord, was led by Bishop Remigius to the baptismal font. As the king approached the water that would wash away his old identity, Remigius is said to have uttered the famous, powerful words, "Metus depone cola, secamber, adora quod incendisti, incend quod adoresti, bow your head in humility, secamber, worship what you have burned, and burn what you have worshipped." The phrase was a masterpiece of rhetoric. By calling him secamber, an ancient and almost mythic name for the Frankish people, Remigius was connecting Clovis's new Christian identity to the very roots of his ancestral past. He was not just becoming a Christian, he was fulfilling the destiny of his people. The command to worship what you have burned referred to the churches and Christian properties that had been destroyed in his earlier campaigns, and the order to burn what you have worshipped was a literal and symbolic command to destroy the pagan idols and abandon the old ways. It was a total and public submission. To consecrate this moment, a legend later arose that became central to the mystique of French kingship for the next 1,000 years. As Remigius prepared to anoint the newly baptized king with holy oil, it was discovered that the chrism was missing. At that moment of crisis, a pure white dove, the symbol of the Holy Spirit, is said to have descended from the heavens, carrying in its beak a small vial, the holy ampulla, filled with oil sent directly from God. With this celestial oil, Clovis was anointed. This story, whether miracle or myth, established the belief that the King of France was not just a king by inheritance or conquest. He was God's chosen ruler, anointed with oil from heaven itself, a status no other monarch in Europe could claim. Clovis emerged from the waters of the baptistry as a new man, a new kind of king. He was no longer just the chieftain of the Franks. He was the sole Catholic monarch of the West, the newest Constantine, the anointed son and protector of the Church. But this holy transformation was also a declaration of war. By choosing Catholicism, he had drawn a theological and political battle line between his kingdom and the Arian kingdoms surrounding him. His baptism was not the peaceful conclusion to his story. It was the sanctified beginning of a new chapter of conquest. Now that he wielded the sword of the Franks and the cross of Rome, where would this newly anointed warlord point them first? When Clovis emerged from the baptismal waters of Reims, the political landscape of the Western world tilted on its axis. He was no longer simply Clovis, king of the Franks. He was now the standard-bearer of Catholic orthodoxy, the spiritual son of the bishops, and a powerful new ally for the distant pope in Rome. News of his conversion spread throughout the Christian world, and the congratulations he received were not mere pleasantries. They were acknowledgments of a new power entering the game, the Byzantine Emperor Anastasius, ruling from the glittering capital of Constantinople. bestowed upon Clovis the honorary title of consul. To a 21st century mind, this might seem like a minor diplomatic gesture, but in the 6th century, it was a political masterstroke. The title of consul was a direct link to the glory and legitimacy of the old Roman Empire. By accepting it, Clovis was wrapped in the purple robes of Roman authority. It allowed his Gallo-Roman subjects to see him not as a barbarian usurper, but as a legitimate successor to Roman rule, a man sanctioned by the last remaining emperor. Now cloaked in this dual legitimacy, the sanctified protector of the Church and an honorary official of the Roman Empire, Clovis could finally address the great strategic prize to his south, the Visigothic kingdom. The Visigoths controlled the rich, fertile, and desirable lands of Aquitaine, a territory that stretched from the Loire River to the Pyrenees. They were powerful, but they had a critical weakness. As Arian Christians, they were viewed as heretics by their vast population of Catholic subjects. Clovis now had the perfect justification for war. According to Gregory of Tours, he framed his ambition in the language of piety. Standing before his assembled army, he did not speak of plunder or land. He reportedly said, "It grieves me to see that these Arians hold a part of Gaul. Let us go forth with God's help, conquer them, and bring the land under our own authority." It was a declaration of holy war. His invasion of Aquitaine was cast not as a conquest, but as a liberation. The Catholic bishops throughout the south openly supported him, seeing him as their champion against their Arian overlords. The decisive confrontation came in the spring of 507, at the Battle of Vouille, near modern-day Poitiers. Here, the two great Germanic powers of Gaul met head-on, the Franks under Clovis and the Visigoths under their king, Alaric II. The battle was fierce, but the momentum was with the Franks. The climax of the battle, as recorded in the chronicles, was a personal duel between the two kings. In the heart of the melee, Clovis sought out Alaric, and, after a brief and brutal fight, killed him with his own hands. With the death of their king, the Visigothic army shattered. The battle was a resounding victory for the Franks. It broke Visigothic power in Gaul forever, forcing them to retreat behind the Pyrenees into Spain. The entire territory of Aquitaine, with its wealthy cities like Bordeaux and Toulouse, now belonged to Clovis. He had effectively doubled the size of his kingdom in a single campaign. But conquest is one thing. Governance is another. The years following the victory at Vouille were arguably the most significant of Clovis's reign, for it was then that he undertook the slow, unglamorous, and deeply boring work of state-building. His first and most lasting achievement was the codification of the Salic law, or Lex Salica. This was a comprehensive law code that took the ancient, unwritten customs of the Frankish people and set them down in writing, blending them with principles of Roman law. It was a monumental step away from tribal justice and toward the rule of law. The Salic law covered everything from theft and property disputes to assault and murder. Its most famous feature was its intricate system of wergold, or money. This was a set monetary value placed on every person and piece of property. If someone was killed, the perpetrator's family had to pay the victim's family the appropriate wergold to prevent a cycle of violent blood feuds. The code is a fascinating window into their society. A free Frankish man was worth 200 solidi. A Roman landowner was worth 100. A bishop was worth 900, showing the immense value placed on the clergy. Even minor injuries had a price. A specific fine for a broken finger, another for a knocked-out tooth. This was the tedious, essential work of creating a civil society, replacing vengeance with regulation. At the same time, Clovis made another crucial decision. He established his capital in the small city of Paris. At the time, Paris was not the grand metropolis it is today. It was a modest but strategically located city on an island in the river Seine. By choosing Paris, Clovis was creating a fixed political center for his kingdom. No longer would the Frankish court be a mobile camp that followed the king on his campaigns. The establishment of a capital signified permanence. the creation of a stable state, with a heart from which its authority would radiate. To cement his new order, in 511, the final year of his life, Clovis sponsored the First Council of Orleans. He summoned 32 bishops from across his newly expanded kingdom to a great synod. Here, they established the foundational rules for the relationship between the Merovingian monarchy and the Church in Gaul. The council decreed the king's duty to protect the Church, while also affirming the king's right to have a say in the appointment of bishops. It created a partnership, an intricate system of mutual support that would define the French state for centuries. The Church would provide the spiritual legitimacy and administrative backbone, and the monarchy would provide the military protection and political authority. Yet, alongside this work of a pious Christian statesman, there was a darker side to Clovis's final years. With his kingdom vast and his main rivals defeated, he turned his attention to internal threats. To ensure that the kingdom would pass undivided to his own 4 sons, he began a systematic and brutal campaign to eliminate all other Frankish kings and any relatives who might challenge his family's sole claim to power. Gregory of Tours recounts these episodes with a chilling, matter-of-fact tone. Clovis would cunningly instigate a son to murder his own father, another Frankish king, only to then have the son assassinated in turn, publicly lamenting their deaths while absorbing their lands and treasure. He wiped out every potential rival with cold, calculated precision. This was the pagan warlord of old, using the tools of treachery and assassination to secure his dynasty, even while he was celebrated as the most Christian king. When Clovis died in Paris, in 511, he was buried in the Abbey of Saint Genevieve, a church he himself had commissioned. He left behind a legacy of profound and unsettling duality. He was the man who brought the Franks into the fold of Christendom and laid the foundations of the French nation. His decision to adopt Catholicism over Arianism was perhaps the most significant political choice of the early medieval period, shaping the destiny of Western Europe. Yet, he was also a man of brutal violence, a political murderer who never fully shed the skin of the ruthless warlord. Was his conversion a true spiritual awakening born from a moment of terror on the battlefield? Or was it the single greatest political calculation of his life? Perhaps the question imposes a modern distinction that a man like Clovis would not have recognized. In the world of the 6th century, faith and power were not separate spheres. Divine favor was demonstrated through earthly victory. A successful king was, by definition, a God-favored king. For Clovis, piety and pragmatism were 2 sides of the same coin. He used his faith to build a kingdom, and he used the violence of a warlord to secure it. This complex, morally ambiguous inheritance, a kingdom, forged by both the cross and the sword, would become the enduring legacy of the Merovingian dynasty.